one of the lessons I do think that is in this world of social media is it's really better to be boring. I know that doesn't sound true, but if you are not snarky and you are not sarcastic, you're likely to have a much better professional reputation long term.
I'm incredibly boring.
Yeah.
I bore myself sometimes.
I know.
Liz is a friend. She's a great person, and what happened was terrible. Stream of conscience. Like, keep it to yourself. Like, not everything. I think Twitter's incredible. I've said it. It's the equalizer. But don't let it be what sinks you in trying to get your next job, especially if you're engaged in public policy. Just be careful. Use social media.
I'm actually incredibly snarky and sarcastic. I feel like when I'm snarky and sarcastic, I can defend it because it's usually unfortunate. Yeah, sorry, but about Republicans. So I don't think it's going to hurt me in my job.
Trolls Republicans.
Yes. I actually got banned from Mike Murphy's Twitter feed.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, he blocked me.
Because you troll him.
I did troll him. Him and Ron Fournier. I got blocked from. But
journalists too.
well, got to point out when they're wrong too. But it still is very smart advice to be very careful what you put out there.
So let me just ask you, because neither of our veterans here answered the question about what have you found about yourself in your own research?
I've never done a vulnerability study on myself. I barely read the stuff. When you get engaged day to day, it's tough to read everything about you. My mom does, though. She Googles me. And so when people call me an idiot, she gets pretty mad, but which happens a lot. But I don't always read everything. That's one thing in a campaign, especially at the presidential level. Some folks can read everything about themselves or every move that you make, and I really try to not to, even on good stuff. And I'm sure there's some good stuff. Like I don't read the good stuff and the bad stuff.
When your mom Googles you and the people, badmouth you, is it more Democrats or Republicans who go after
Well, it's probably more Republicans.
That's what I
It was during the Republican primary at the height of it, where people get upset. But there's bipartisan hate for me. Let's be honest. There might be slightly more Republican due to the long, protracted Republican primary we had back in the day.
I despite being snarky and sarcastic, I live a relatively boring life. Yeah. I've done Google searches on myself every once in a while. I think there's been a couple of things where my name was in a FOIA, where I've requested records, which I don't know. I don't think that's all that exciting. But I'm of an older generation where researchers were neither seen nor heard. I was supposed to not be in the press. And for years, I didn't even have a website because I believed that. I internalized that message that I'm not supposed to be out front. That's not my job. And it wasn't until, I think, like 3 or 4 years ago, I actually had any presence online at all. So, I don't think there's that much about me. I'm sure my students have Googled me just to double check. And they haven't found anything incriminating. They haven't bribed me for grades or anything like that.
Good.
Not yet. So, I don't think there's anything that interesting out there.
Yeah. So I will tell you, I did Google myself, and the thing that was most surprising to me were just all of my donation records, because I actually worked in politics as a political fundraiser. And when you're involved as a fundraiser, oftentimes you're also contributing to other candidates to go to other events and things like that. And of course, one of my students came to me at one point and said, "Boy, you sure supported a whole bunch of losers." And I was like, well, yeah, occupational hazard.
Welcome to politics.
So that I do know is out there and available. Is there any other question, anything you want to say, Matt? Did you want to talk about America Rising?
One thing, I think America Rising would be a good segue, because Brett talked about the way research was back in the day. You did your research and you tried not to get your name in the press, and then, like I've told you, new media and social media changed all that. After the Romney campaign, I set up an organization called America Rising, which I think it's a super PAC and a company, and I think it's really, evolved communications and research a lot, especially since when we first came to town. And the reason why I did it, when I was Mitt Romney's campaign manager, Unfortunately, for Mitt and I, the Democrats were much more nimble about setting up outside groups. We had a lot of outside groups on the Republican side that were focused on paid advertising. We could compete with anybody in television commercials. But the Democrats, to their credit, they invested in using soft money and data. They invested it in opposition research and earned media, working with reporters to drive negative news narratives against Republicans. And a bunch of Harry Reid guys got together back in 2010, probably some of your friends, and they set up a group called American Bridge. And they had a profound impact on the 2012 cycle. So when Mitt and I started running the campaign in 2011, the first organization to ask Mitt to release his tax returns, it wasn't Newt Gingrich, it wasn't Tim Pawlenty, it wasn't Rick Perry, it was American Bridge. And they asked us in the summer of 2011. And by the time, it was the summer of 2011, they had built up enough credibility with news media outlets that if they attacked a Republican, that Republican had to respond. And so unfortunately for us in 2012, no group was set up on the outside. So after the campaign in March of 2013, I set up an organization called America Rising. And we decided we would focus on research, rapid response communications, and video tracking, putting out, we haven't even gotten into tracking, but basically putting out trackers all across the country. We had trackers and full-time trackers in 36 different states where these young people followed Democrats around at public events all across the country so that we would have a video record of the things that they said and did. And I think our group had a profound impact in the 2014 cycle. There were Senate candidates that lost, I think, because of America Rising in places like Iowa. There were news narratives that were driven against many Democrats, including Secretary Clinton, that just weren't happening before. But because of social media and new media, groups like America Rising and FEC laws like McCain-Feingold and Citizens United, which Russ Feingold actually is breaking his own law right now as we speak. Sean knows. Sean works at America Rising, that's why he got that joke. But it's had a profound impact. And so the researchers are rapid responders. They're interacting directly with reporters, many of them, and it's just changed the whole landscape. And it's all because of new media and social media, in my opinion.
I would also say it's a growing field. So if anybody's looking for work, go out there and do it. Because in addition to places like American Bridge and America Rising, a lot of people are starting up outside PACs, IEs, and because of coordination rules, you have campaigns that have to do research multiple times. Beyond the people who work for the campaign have to do the research, and then the outside groups have to do the research because they can't share. So you'll have, the same fields being plowed a couple of times by researchers. So it is a growing field, and it's a great way to get into the business. So, we were talking about this earlier, go out there and do it. Just say yes, follow somebody around with a camera for 6 months. It's a great way to get your foot in the door. And one thing about campaigns, I know because there's a Clinton and a Bush running again, people think that it's royalty, but campaigns are a meritocracy. If you're good, people will notice, you'll move up. Whether you win or lose, people notice. And so if you get out there and you hustle and you show that you're willing to do the job and you do it well, you'll move up. And research is a great way to get your foot in the door.
I guess one of the points I was going to make, so I'll ask you guys, working for a campaign finance organization who has some problems with the potential coordination between like American Rising and the Jeb Bush or whoever the Republican nominee is, and certainly, Hillary Clinton and American Bridge have been pretty public about them just working together. Does it scare you guys, or should it scare candidates that, American Rising can do oppo research for Republican candidates, but whoever the GOP nominee is doesn't actually control what you guys put out, just like Hillary Clinton's not going to control what American Bridge or Trust the Record puts out. When you just have, you can have an individual donor contributing to a PAC, or in your case, I think you're an LLC and a super PAC.
Sounds like you researched me.
Yeah. You also have no Twitter account.
As Mitt's campaign manager, I wish, when you're on the hard dollar side, when I was Mitt's campaign manager, I would love to control the message more. I would love to, be able to use a lot of the money that was used, especially on paid advertisement, and spend it in a way that I think would have helped Mitt a lot better. But, we live in a McCain-Feingold, post-Citizens United world. It's just a reality.
Yeah.
And so Mitt was on the receiving end of Democrat groups on the outside who just beat our side to the punch. And so, it's the world we live in, and these groups need to be set up in a legal way, and that's very important. So much of the work we do at our LLC, we're disclosed on FEC reports. We talked about that before. It's not, we don't hide who our clients are. You can Google and find out, we'll be in RNC FEC reports, senatorial committees, some campaigns. That's the reality of how we're set up. Are there rogue groups out there that set up organizations in a way that they probably shouldn't? Sure. And I feel like that's why there's groups like Common Cause, new groups like FACT on the right. I'll put a plug in for FACT that are holding Democrats accountable for FEC law, campaign finance law. But, it's a reality. It's a reality. And I set up America Rising because whoever has my job in 2016 and whoever is our candidate, it needs to be an equal level playing field. And everything that we do with America Rising, we own. It's my reputation. It's people that have invested in America Rising. We have to maintain our credibility. And so that's what controls what we do and how we are good stewards of sharing our content. But, it's the world that we live in based on the laws that have been put into place.
So with that, what I want to actually do is give everyone a round of applause. Let Matt take off, because he does have a prior engagement in about 15 minutes. And then we'll stay and take a few questions, and then we'll break at about 8:15 and finish off the food.
Well, let me thank you all for sharing the stage, and thanks everyone for coming out tonight. It's my wedding anniversary, so I am going out to dinner.
Important engagement.
It's a legit excuse. But before I leave, I just want to say I know the room has Democrats and Republicans, and I think Brett and I could certainly agree. I just want people of both parties, and I say this every time I do anything for GSPM or anytime I talk to a school, we need good people involved in politics and in government, whether they are Democrats, whether they are Republicans, liberals, or conservatives. So, I'm excited that you all came here tonight. I hope that, if you're not already a part of GW, that you become a part of GW, that you engage in politics and government, because we certainly, I think we all could agree, we need good people in politics. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't do the Q&A, but thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Make sure you take your swag.
I'll take my swag. Thank you.
Thank you again, Matt. And now Laura and I are going to open for questions. I'll start because I know people always get shy at the beginning. So I was going to ask each of our panelists, if you had one tip and one tip only to give people that are looking for a job in Washington, because it is so very competitive, what would that tip be?
I'll start. Say yes. Whatever they ask you, say yes. So I've done phone interviews. Part of what I do is I also put people on campaigns into research. And I can tell you that when I hire people, the folks that I wind up hiring are usually the people who are eager, they want to go out, they're willing to do it. They don't hem and haw when I tell them, hey, guess what, you're going to Indiana. They're not like, oh, well, I was hoping to go. They say yes. And I can tell you that out of the last 3 people I hired, 2 of them, when I got off the phone, I realized they didn't even ask me how much the job paid. They were just so eager to do it. They just wanted to impress me. They wanted to show that they were willing to do whatever it took to get the job. And those are the people that you want, because if you're smart, I can teach you how to do research, but I can't motivate you. And if you've been on a campaign, it is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no, man, it's 7 o'clock, I got to go. That's not how campaigns work. So I want the person who is eager and is dying to get out there and is going to do whatever I ask. And the whole say yes thing is, in addition to being eager, when I give someone a task, I don't want to hear, well, gee, I can't do that, or that, tell me how you're going to get around that problem. Tell me how you're going to figure out to get the job done. And only until you've exhausted all possibilities, come back to me and say, hey, we just can't do it. Because I have 20 things that I'm trying to get done. If you're working for me and you can't get what you're doing, and I have to help you with what you're doing, it means I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So say yes, eagerly.
Yes to the dress.
Yes, eagerly say yes.
Well, I would say on top of saying yes, don't be afraid to take opportunities that might not necessarily align with what your original goal is. This is a hard industry to get into. We all know that. But if your heart has been set on perhaps doing press and you get offered a finance position, take it. The worst case scenario is that you learn a new skill. That's the worst. The best case scenario, maybe you find something else that you're passionate about within the industry.
Yeah, I'd just echo that. I mean, when I came here, I worked for a corporate lobbying group, which is funny based on the work I do now. For about 4 months, I interned. And after that, all I wanted to do was work on the Hill. I just wanted to be a staff assistant, maybe an LC. I was still in my first semester at GSPM, and I got offered a research job for a labor union that eventually led to other contracts. And, 4 years later, you can't pay me enough money to go work on the Hill. I mean, there's just, say yes to it, try it out, and it's DC. If you don't like it, find another job. People leaving after 6 months in a job is not uncommon.
Thank you. Those are all good pointers. First question, please state your name and where you're from.
Hello, my name is Arash. I'm from Iran, and I'm going to, for the next semester, be in GW for the political management program. My question is regarding the partisanship in the United States. Don't you think that the part of the partisanship is based on the negative ads as a result of what you are doing exactly? In the last presidential election in 2012, more than 80% of TV ads are negative. And you are now in Congress, you can find in the every single issues, Democrats and Republicans are separated, but for the trade deal that some folks of Republican and the President Obama, and they are together. So this is my question, my first question. And the second question, what exactly you're doing as a researcher? Because doing research is, I think this is very easy. Are you making the contents or finding the contents? I mean, for example, if you do research on something, are you finding the way you have to advertise that one, to making videos, do campaigning for that, or something like this question? Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that there is a trade-off to partisanship. If those negative ads did not exist, aside from them being an effective campaign tactic, don't you want to know who you're voting for? Don't you want a full background of who's going to be representing you? If the campaigns are not doing that research and releasing it to the public, then do you really know who you're electing to represent you? Pardon?
Sometimes it's not ethical, right? Labeling someone to get the job done, right?
I think it depends on how you're getting that information. And from my experience doing research, everyone is incredibly ethical. The information that they're getting is publicly available, sourced information. It's coming from newspapers. It's coming from research databases. It's information that anyone can get. It's just a matter of aggregating it and getting it out there.
And let's also just say that, right, it's not the researchers that you have problems with. It's the comms people, right? Who's been...
Look, it's a fair question, but I will say a couple of things. One, And I tell this to people all the time, what we find, I do positive and negative, I do defensive and offensive, and we test it. And we don't run campaigns just for the fun of it. We don't sit around and go, you know what, let's destroy that guy. That guy sucks.
Yeah.
We say, here's the information, and we put it out there in a scientific manner. We poll it. And the information comes back saying, you know what moves voters? That piece of information. So it's, you know, when you see regular ads on TV, they don't put it out there just willy-nilly. They put it out there because something says this works. And so is it partisanship because we're doing negative ads, or a negative ads because people are more partisan than they've ever been? And I can tell you that people get their information from sources that agree with their point of view. And so this, you know, people always ask me, oh man, that campaign was so negative, that was awful, you must have hated it. You know, I'd love to run ads that only say, hey, here's the 5 things we did that were great. It doesn't work. And there's a reason why it doesn't work. It's because it doesn't move people. So, you know, you could say, yeah, the information is negative and you shouldn't run it. But trust me, if it didn't work, we wouldn't use it. We're not in the business of losing or setting a strategy just to make ourselves happy. We do this because it works. And as for how you do research, I teach a course. More than happy to have you. Part of the course is explaining how we do research. But what it is, so it is going through everything that's publicly available on your candidate and the opposing candidate. And while that sounds somewhat easy, it can be as many as 10, 20, 30,000 articles. And you have to read that. And then you not only have to read that, but you have to find out what in those articles is pertinent to the campaign. Because if you're doing a defensive on your candidate, and you say, oh, that's not important, and the other campaign thinks it is and it works, and they attack you on it, then they win and you lose. So it's not just going out and picking up the information. You have to pick it up, read through it, analyze it, think like your opponent, and then put it together in a format that your campaign can use to test, use for ads, use for mail, and also use for rapid response. It's probably the single most, outside of knocking on doors, it is the single most labor-intensive thing you can do on a campaign.
Let me also just add, political science has long shown that the contrast ads are actually the most informative ads. So when you're talking about sort of what's a negative ad, in fact, when a candidate goes negative, they usually have to have more facts than when they go positive. In fact, the ads that have the least amount of content are essentially the bio puff pieces that every candidate runs. So one of the things that's really fascinating about the way our system works, and has worked really since Jefferson and Adams went at each other in 1796, is that it is about the fact that through the contact, if you will, the truth will emerge. That is the sort of bedrock principle of competition and pluralism.
Another question?
Even after Sandy.
Your name, please, and where you're from?
My question is, you know, it was being said earlier that you have to be careful what you put on Facebook, and be careful what you put on Twitter, and that's so true. And I think that's sort of kind of a conservative mindset in terms of old guard political operatives that don't want to put anything out there. But then there's also a push and an appetite for content in terms of not only what the media wants, but just what the public wants. And you know, you have to get stuff out there very quick. I'm talking about from a positive point of view, putting your stuff out there, campaign and elected official has to put their stuff out there quick. And how do you balance that? Because there is that feel. Let's not say anything. I've worked with candidates that don't want to put anything. I put it through a whole committee, and by the time the tweet is ready to be finalized, after 10 people, you know, the news is dead. And so you're losing that ability to reach new voters and gain traction with social media. So how do you balance that?
Well, at first, Staten Island is a very nice place to grow up. My family still lives there. I don't know if they voted for your guy, though. I would say that there has to be a level of trust. One of the things that always amazed me about the Schumer campaign is that when Congressman Schumer ran for Senate, his campaign manager was 27 years old. I was 27. Howard Wolfson, who was his press person, was 29. It was a bunch of folks who were under the age of 20, under the age of 30, which is unusual in a major statewide race. But Chuck trusted us to do our jobs. And as far as content, I think you have to have trust. I agree with you that we're the Democratic Party, but I don't believe campaigns should be democratic. I think there has to be certain people who are in control, and when you start washing it through committees, I think it takes too long. I think it loses its value, and it's a rapid-fire universe now, much more so than it was when I was doing it, on the ground 17, 18 years ago. And even then, we didn't want anything taking longer than 25 minutes to 30 minutes before we got it back out there. So, trust. You have to have the right people. You have to trust them to put out the right stuff and do their jobs. And you just got to let it go because, as you pointed out, look, we all worked on campaigns where everything has to be shopped through the little groups that do everything. And those are the ones that really make you consider like going home and opening up a bakery. Those are the places you just have no interest in working on because it is a rapid fire business. And if you are not being rapid fire, and so again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about saying yes. If you have proven people, if you have people around you that you know are good, trust them to do their jobs, let them put the stuff out, and go.
Question from Darren. Your name, please, where you're from.
I'm Darren Eustace. I currently live in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I do professional opposition research for the North Carolina GOP, among other places, GSPM Alums 2004. First of all, thank you, very informative. If I could make one comment regarding the negativity associated with opposition research, the way I approach that is I like to say you would not buy a used car without going to Carfax. You should not vote for a used politician without first checking with the Carfax of politics, which is you folks up on the stage. My question would be this. New technology comes, it seems like there's something new every month or every few weeks. I got in just when microfilm was giving way to LexisNexis, and now we have Facebook and Twitter and all kinds of stuff. If you all could tell me what recent technological developments, and by recent I would say the last 1 or 2 years, have sprung up that you think have maybe either made your job easier in terms of finding things or made your job harder in terms of finding things?
I would say some of the people finding databases. LexisNexis, for example, you have more of a media focus on it, but it also does have, at a higher level, the ability to research individual people, though it's very hard to get the license for that. Now, though, there are databases out there like Intellius, for example, where for maybe $10 you can run a search. And if you happen to have a candidate, or if you're researching someone that has a common name, and you're trying to source information and you're trying to just kind of get that baseline, it's pretty helpful in narrowing down the field and kind of helping you vet the information that you have found out there. And it makes it easier, and it's much more inexpensive, I would say.
Yes, so not talking about technological improvements that help. I think when I've done oppo books, and when you go and you start doing at the state level, because I did oppo books on state legislators in states that don't have the business entity search online, or when they do, it's not very easy to use. The when you go into the state and municipal level, the lack or how far some of these states are behind in terms of updating databases and updating search functions because they just don't have the money to invest in it, it can really get in the way, and you're so used to just being able to find everything on Google or LexisNexis or whatever. That would be, if you ever want to make a lot of money, go out and like create a company that sells states universal databases. It makes our job a lot easier if every state had the same thing, you know, the same way to search function and same criteria to search.
I would say, one, just commenting on something you said. Last cycle, I worked for a gentleman who was a member of Congress named Joe Garcia, who was in Miami. And looking up someone named Joe Garcia in Miami was not an easy task.
Yeah.
And then I found out his first name really wasn't Joe, it was Jose, which did not make it any easier at all. But I think there are databases that make our jobs a lot easier. And what you're seeing now is a lot of states are doing unified court systems online. Maryland has one, Virginia has one, New York has one, a couple other states have. So if you want to look up the court records in a state, you just have one portal to go through, and that makes life a lot easier. I don't think they did it with us in mind. I think they did it for the lawyers in the state, but that certainly has made our jobs a lot easier. But in general, it has become more difficult to do what we do because there's so much more information you have to go through. Every time a new technology exists or more disclosure exists means more work. So while you have the advantage of more information, you still have to do more work, and there's only so many hours in the day you can do it.
And to follow up on what you said, Brett, a lot of the job now is not just finding information, but narrowing the field of information. So if you do decide to get into opposition research, aside from taking Brett's class, one thing that I do recommend that you do at some point in your GSPM career, go to Gelman Library. They have a research technology seminar or just a mini class that they do. And it really helps you learn how to use these databases effectively. I cannot tell you how the different results you would get if you were to, I don't know, say put in the name Barack Obama on a database and then in your next search, put parentheses around his name. You'll get completely different results. And knowing those little tips and tricks on how to effectively use databases can really help your research skills down the road.
And Amanda, you didn't even know, but tomorrow at 3:30, we have a session at the Gelman Library to teach people how to do these things.
Synergy, you gotta learn.
Yes.
Perfect.
You know, I think there's one other thing I would add in that you brought up the unified court system. I remember when I was doing books on legislators, like a pain in the ass when you got to a state and you had to go through each county. But another problem we still have is public records requests. Like, there are a lot of states that legislators or different government agencies are just exempt from public records, and you know, Congress is exempt from public records. You can't see any communications, and the fact of how they send them. You know, I've had public records requests come in UPS box to me, and you have to go through pages and pages. I had them send in a drive. I'll tell you, I was working for a labor coalition right before Scott Walker's recall, and they had sent in a public records request. I forget what it was even about. It was probably like every time the word Coke was mentioned in any communications within Scott Walker's office. We were waiting and waiting and waiting for them because a lot of these state laws lets the candidates or let the office get back to you whenever they want. There's supposed to be some time, but he sent it to us. They finally got it back to us a day before the recall election. My job was to go through 4,000 pages of public records requests. Nothing that interesting ever came out of it, but it's another fun part of this job that we didn't really talk about is going through public records requests and figuring out how to really get them and how to be good at that. There's a skill to it.
Well, we have a lot more to say, but I see that we've run out of time. So please join me in thanking all our panelists, and you're welcome to have more food.
More food. Thank you again for being here. We're going to stick around for 20 minutes or so and and have some coffee or hors d'oeuvres. And please do ask us any questions you have about the program. Feel free to chat up our panelists and our faculty and alums. Great. So thank you for coming.